Approaches to adding subtotals. I'm going to walk you through a couple of distinct ways you can inject subtotals into your dataset. I want to demonstrate how you can utilize the dedicated tools sitting right there on the Excel ribbons, and I will also show you how to achieve a similar result using a specific formula. Most people have a general sense of what a subtotal actually is, but if you are new to this, let's briefly clarify the concept before we dive in. Looking at the data we have here, you might decide that every time the specific section changes, you want to see a summary of the sales figures for that area. For instance, right after the list of entries for Europe ends, you want a new row inserted that says Europe Subtotal and calculates the total sales amount for the entire European section. You would likely want the same behavior for Asia, North America, Africa, and any other sections in the list. As I mentioned, there are two main ways to tackle this, but by far the most flexible and straightforward method is to use the subtotal option found on the data ribbon, using the subtotal tool on the ribbon. To get started, make sure you have clicked somewhere inside your dataset. Then head up to the data ribbon and look all the way over to the right in the outline group, where you will find a button labeled Subtotal. If you hover over it, the screen tip tells you that this tool quickly calculates rows of related data by inserting subtotals and totals, which are exactly what we need. Go ahead and click that button. Excel needs us to clarify a few things in this dialog box for the magic to happen. First, we need to tell it when to trigger a subtotal, effectively answering the question, at each change in what? For this example, I want a subtotal every time the section changes. You could theoretically do this for country, so every time the list switches from Brazil to Peru, you get a total. But we are going to stick with section here. Next, we tell Excel what operation to perform. I want it to sum all the sales amounts, so I'll leave the function set to sum. However, if you wanted to count how many sales occurred per section, you could select count, or if you needed the average sale size, you could choose average. Finally, we need to select the specific column we want to total up. For me, that is going to be the sales amount. There are also a few checkboxes at the bottom to consider. I'm going to choose Replace Current Subtotals, just in case there are any existing ones. I do not want a page break between groups right now, but I definitely want to check Summary Below Data, because I prefer seeing my totals at the bottom of each section rather than at the top. Click OK, and let's see what that did to our list. You will notice the structure has changed. When you scroll down to the end of the Europe entries, you now have a row reading Europe Total, and it shows the sum in the sales column. If you scroll further, you see the same thing for the Asia total, North America total, and so on. It looks pretty good, but you might have noticed a strange vertical bar appearing on the far left side of the screen with numbers 1, 2, and 3 at the top. Understanding outline levels. That sidebar is actually a really powerful way to view your data at different levels. If you click the number 1 button, it collapses everything up to the most basic level, showing you only the grand total for the entire dataset. If you click number 2, it expands just enough to show you the subtotals for each section, effectively filtering out all the individual line items so you can focus purely on the summaries. Clicking number 3 expands everything back out, so you can see the granular detail alongside the subtotals and totals. These buttons essentially act like global expand and collapse controls. If you prefer a more manual approach, you can also use the little minus signs in that sidebar to collapse specific sections, or the plus signs to expand them back out. Modifying and removing subtotals. If you decide you want to change how this report looks, you don't need to undo everything. You can simply click the Subtotal button again to make adjustments. I'll keep the grouping by section, but this time let's try counting the number of orders instead of summing them. Since we are just counting entries, the specific function doesn't matter as much, but we will switch the function to count. Let's also try checking page break between groups and uncheck Summary Below Data, just so you can see what it looks like when the summary appears above the group. Click OK, and the layout shifts significantly. Now the grand total is sitting at the very top. Because we are doing a count, you see the Europe count, Asia count, and others displayed at the start of their respective data blocks. I find this layout quite hard to read. I would almost certainly go back into the dialog box, recheck Summary Below Data, and click OK. To me, having the total at the bottom is much more intuitive. If you ever want to get rid of these groupings entirely, just go back into the Subtotal dialog and click the Remove All button. This instantly reverts your data to its original state, which is really helpful if you made a mistake or just need the raw list back. Calculating subtotals with a formula. That was the first method, but the second method involves using an Excel formula. It is a bit more manual, and I don't tend to use it as often because the subtotal button is so efficient at handling every section in one go. However, knowing the formula is useful for specific situations where you might need more control. Since this is a manual process, you first need to physically insert a blank row where you want the total to appear. Once you have a blank row, you might type a label like Europe Sub in the appropriate cell and perhaps bold it using Control B. Then in the cell where you want the number, let's say E34, we will use the subtotal function. Type an equal sign and start typing SUB. You will see subtotal appear in the IntelliSense list. Use your arrow keys to highlight it and tab to select it. The first argument of the function it asks for is the function number. This is where you define what math you want to do. We want to do a sum calculation again, so scroll down the list until you find the sum and press tab to select it. Type a comma to move to the next argument. The next argument is the reference, which is just the range of cells you want to total. Select the sales amount cells for the section just above, for example E25 to E33. Close your bracket and hit Enter. It gives you the subtotal, effectively doing the same math as the ribbon tool. The catch, of course, is that it only did it for Europe. You would now have to manually insert rows and write that formula for every single other section in your dataset. That is generally why I prefer the button on the data ribbon. It's just quicker and more efficient. But there will be instances where the formula is the better tool for the job, so it's a handy thing to keep in your back pocket.